Hey guys, and welcome back to Adobe After Effects. In today's lesson we're going to be working with the tracker tool. The tracking tool is very cool tool to use. So let's just show you what we will be creating, and I'll quickly explain everything and then we'll jump right into it. Okay, so let me just make it a bit more visible for you guys. So we're going to be working with the single tracking tool, and we're going to be working with the double tracking tool. So the single tracking tool only calculates the position, the X and Y position, and the double tracking tool will calculate the X and Y as well as the scale. So if you look over here where it says streets and the little T graphic, as I go through, the streets is only using the single tracker, so it's only tracking the X and the Y. It's only tracking the position, it's not tracking the scale. So as you can see, there's no scaling involved with the streets text there. But if you look at the large building and the buildings text, when we scroll through it, the tracker tracks the scale and the position. So as we get closer, it actually scales up, and the buildings right at the back, at the far building, scales up very slowly to make it almost look like it's actually there in the scene, and that is actually the whole point. So this is what we'll be making, and let's get started. In the second part, we will also be using the tracker tool to attach text to our buildings, to the sides of our buildings. It will look a little something like this. Alright, so as you can see, it looks like the epic text is actually on the side of the building, and now we can track more than just text. So we will track a picture or even a video onto the side of the building, but this is just to show you guys what we will be learning in the next 2 or 3 lessons. Thank you. Alright guys, so before we get started, we are going to be using a new object called a null object. And a null object is an invisible layer that has all the properties of a visible layer, so that it can be parent to any layer in the composition. So basically, a null object is an invisible helper that stores all of the keyframes that you can then tell a text to parent. So the null object will store all this information, and then you can just link it to a text, and that text or that object that you choose will take all the data that the null object has stored onto it. Alright, so we can start off by just dragging in our footage. Alright, so now instead of going to composition and creating a new composition, we have our footage here, so we can just use this as our composition settings. So we can just drag it into this option here, which is new composition, or you can just drag it here at the bottom next to our timeline. Okay, and then it will show up. So now we're going to create that null object. So we'll go right click and we'll go new null object, and then we'll just rename this to streets. So we're going to attach our street text to it and our street graphics that we'll make. Okay, so now we can double click on our footage and it will open up a new window here. So now we've got our actual composition window and our layer window, which has the footage. Alright, so we can then come here to our window and select our tracker tool, and you'll see it show up over here. What we can do quickly is we'll come to our node and we'll just rename it, and we'll rename it to street-node. Just so when we add the text that says street, we can tell the difference between the text and the node. Okay, so now make sure you aren't on your composition panel, make sure you are on your layer with the video. So if it isn't there, once again you just have to come down here to your timeline and then double click on it. And then with the tracker tool, we're going to make sure that we have our video selected on the timeline, and we're going to say track motion. Okay, and over here at edit target, we're going to make sure it says street node. Okay, so it's going to be our null object. Alright, so now as you can see, we have a track point 1 on our screen. This is our single track point. So we can zoom in and move it around, and we are going to give it something to track. So the very center here is the reference where the keyframes are going to be made. This first box here is what it's going to look for, and the second box here is where it's going to search for everything in this first box. Okay, so let's say we wanted to track the corner of this building. Okay, so we're saying that it must look for these pixels in this space here. Okay, so you can make this very big, but then it will just take extremely long to analyze. So I don't suggest making this too much bigger than your smaller box. Okay, so with tracking, it is a lot of playing around. You might get it on the first go, you might track it and have no problems on the first go, or you might have to track it once or twice over, or stop it at a halfway mark and choose a track point and then continue tracking it. So it's all about the footage you're using and like the tracking point that you pick. So we're going to try and track this light here as our tracking point. Okay, so we're just going to make this little rectangle, and it will search for these lights in that area. Okay, so now you can keep quite zoomed in, and then you can just say analyze forward here at the bottom. Okay, as long as it's staying on that light, it's all good. You can just pause it. We can hold down space and move our comp, or we can just use our middle mouse. We can continue to analyze it. Okay, and so far so good. And this big building's now going to rush in front of it, which is fun, because we'll just make the text fade away when this big building rushes in front of it. Okay, so if your text does some weird thing like halfway through, you can just then play around with your tracker points again, and as long as you're still working on that area and you tell it to analyze forward, it will just overwrite the frames. Okay, so all it will do is overwrite. Awesome. Okay, and then you can just click on apply dimensions X and Y and click OK. Now as you can see, our street node, okay, if you drop down the transform, has all of these keyframes for every frame of the composition. Okay, which is good. That's what we want. So now we're going to create our text. Okay, and we're just going to call it street. Okay, zoom in a little bit here, and we'll drag it over our street. Alright, and then here where it says none, so having your street text selected, where it says none, here you're going to select your street node. So you're essentially parenting it to your street node. So now your street text, even though there's nothing in the transform, we've told it to now use the transform of the street node object. Okay, so if I play through the video, you'll see the street text is staying over the street there. Okay, we can actually just move this a little bit up. Okay, that looks good. And then here where the bolding is flying by it, we can just come to the transform and we'll just make it disappear. Alright, so let's just have a quick look at what that looks like. Okay, let's check. Okay, so it looks good, but it is a little bit jolty, so we're going to try and make it a little bit smoother. Okay, so we'll drop down our street node and we'll drop down our graph editor and we'll double click on position, and you'll see all of these bar graphs here, and you'll just click and you'll drag and select all of them. Okay, and then you'll go to window and you'll go to smoother, tolerance 1, and just click apply. Alright, and let's see here. I think it should fade out a little bit sooner. Text should fade out a little bit sooner, so we can close our graph editor and then just move that about there. Okay, so hopefully now we don't get as much of that jolty effect. So we'll just play it through, and yeah, that looks nice. Alright, so now we can add our little graphics under our street here. So we'll quickly just say new solid. We'll keep it white solid and keep it the same within height and have it a white color. Okay, now you can just turn off the visibility and come to your rectangle tool here, and you can just draw a rectangle like an underline under your street. You can turn your visibility back on. You just click the eye and that turns your visibility on and off, and then we can click and drag another one pointing down at the street. Right, and what else can we add? Maybe we can make a nice ellipse tool here. So I'm zoomed in real far now, so we'll make an ellipse like that. We'll click on our mask 3, which is our ellipse, Control D to duplicate or invert it. Sorry, we will subtract it, and we will make it a little bit smaller, so -4 pixels, so we get that little ring effect there. So if we zoom out and we take a look at what it looks like, now we can see. So now we just have to do the same thing, because right now only our streets parented to the node. So now we're just going to do the same thing for our white solid, make it parented to the street node, come to our street text here. We're just going to grab the fade out effect and we're going to paste it over the graphics that we just made. Alright, so here we have everything fading out at the correct time. Awesome, so there's our first text being tracked. Okay, so now we're going to, let's just do one more. We'll have a nice big text here, or maybe at the back by those buildings down there. Okay, so we'll create another new null object and we will rename it to back node. Okay, and then we'll add a new text and we'll call it buildings. Okay, and we'll make it a little bit smaller because we're going to pretend it's all the way back there. Okay, so now we can come back to our layer, because now we're going to track a new object. We're going to track the new node. Okay, so you can just quickly get your tracker tool back, and we're going to track motion, position and rotation. Okay, and make sure that your edit target is now set to the back node instead of the street node, and then just click OK. Alright, so now we're working with scale and position. So it's given us two little nodes here, so, or two little tracker nodes. So our first tracker, let's see, let's maybe tell it to track this light. Okay, so I must keep track of that light and the corner of the section of the building here. Okay, just going to run through just to make sure everything is kept in the video. Okay, so it is, so we're going to track it with those two spots and see how it plays out. So sorry, make sure we're tracking position and scale. We aren't tracking rotation. So just make sure before you start analyzing, only position and scale. Okay, and then we'll analyze forward. Looking good so far. Okay, great. So I didn't lose it at all, so that's a good thing. So we can just tell it to apply now. Apply X and Y. Okay. Awesome. So now we've jumped back into our actual comp, And you can see now our back node has the position and scale keyframes attached to it. Okay, so you know what's next. We'll come to the bolding text and we click it and we make it the back node. Okay, so now we can run through it. This one looks a lot better. We don't even need to smooth it, I don't think. That looks very, very nice. So last thing we can do is we can just copy our graphics here. So we can just copy this and we can, can move it over here. Okay, and we can make the parent our back node. Okay, and then obviously we can take away, we can go into our white solid one, come to the transform and take away the fade out for this one in particular. We did duplicate them, so they are both called white solids, but it's okay as long as you know which one is which. So it does highlight it, so you'll know which one you're working with. So for this one, you just want to take away the opacity so it doesn't fade out. And then as well, we can actually come into the masks and we can delete the two bottom ones, and even we can just have it an underline. Okay. Alright, so one more thing we can do is we can create a new solid, make it for the screen, and then you can come here to the effects and presets and just type in ramp and drag the ramp over the new white object. Okay, you can make the start color black and the end color a green, and then just right click and we'll be blending it over our scene. So blending mode, we'll just have the color blending mode. Okay, and then we can also blend with original, so we can get some of the original colors back. Let's see, perhaps maybe a orangey color. Okay, I think I like this color. Okay, so now when we run through it, it has that nice orange tint to it. Obviously that last part is optional. You can just delete it if you don't want to use it, but that is how you can add some cool color effect. I thought I'd just add it in there just for fun. So let's quickly render it out one last time so we can have a nice look at everything. Okay, and then here it is. Very cool. Very, very cool. Another thing that we can do is we can add a song. So we can just drag in a song that we want to use, just drag it to the bottom, and now we can watch it with our song. Okay. Awesome. So that was motion tracking, and we will be doing more motion tracking in the next episode, where we will be adding text to the actual buildings, and it's gonna look really cool. We'll also add some like pictures and maybe some images to the buildings, so to actually look like they are attached. Like we'll maybe make our own billboard almost. So we'll make our own little billboard here with some text underneath it, so when we're running by it, it looks like it's actually there on the building. Okay, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next lesson.